Avatar: The Last Airbender failed compared to the original. Now I'm going to be talking about 4 components, which is basically going to go through all these things, and that way we can follow it together and we can all share our opinions in the comments anyway. So the 4 components are going to be considering pacing, effects, and CGI, the acting, and the writing. First up, we got the pacing. The pacing of the TV show feels so quick, it's insane. It's almost like they jump so often between so many different scenes. For example, when they go from Sozin's Comet to Aang blowing up the ocean to instantly going to the Southern Water Tribe or Wolf's Cove. Also, the time jump doesn't even feel like a time jump. I'm just nitpicking at this point, but it is an adaptation after all. And like Sozin's Comet was 100 years ago, but all of a sudden, they didn't even let us know that it was 100 years until they just mentioned it in character dialogue. So you would be so confused for a brief moment if you never even watched the animation. You'd be like, what the fuck is going on? And if you don't believe me that the pacing is bad in this show, I found 2 other YouTubers that are the biggest movie stans ever. Let's hear what they have to say about this.
This is what I mean by the show has a lot of the core beats, because this moment is technically the Netflix show, but it doesn't hit as hard because it's kind of rushed past.
I think it's because they tried to condense so much story into only 8 episodes that they had to rush through everything, and you feel it. It feels so fucking rushed with its narrative.
Not to mention the fact that the original is only 30 minutes longer than the live action. 20 episodes, 23 minutes each. Whereas the live action is 8 episodes at about 53 minutes each on average. And already you can tell that it's really not doing a good job of justifying why it even exists. I mean, in the Omashu episode, they both show the Mechanist, Jet, King Boomy, and the Cave of Two Lovers. And it's just too much. It's just way too much. And next we have the effects. The effects, especially the CGI, looks weird in some situations. For example, there's this weird motion blur halfway through the movements, which make the people look like a weird anime character. In some scenarios, it looks kinda good. For example, like the animals. Appa and Momo, when they're flying or moving around, looks really good. And especially when Aang is in the Avatar state, and the actual bending itself, especially firebending, is pretty good. But that's pretty much it, I'm not gonna lie. Third, we got acting. Now, acting felt quite monotone and wooden due to the last part of the 2nd episode and onward. I kinda noticed that a bit. However, Zuko, played by Dallas Liu, did a great fucking job of Zuko, to be honest. I think that's how you pronounce it, Dallas Liu, Dallas Liu, whatever the fuck it is. I felt like the TV show, though, felt really, really rushed.
Fucking delicious.
No.
Like I said before, just no time for character development. The characters just have 0 time to develop, and you really feel like there's 0 camaraderie, there's no chemistry, because you don't spend any time with them. It's just so frustrating, and it just feels like they force lighthearted moments between multiple different characters, and it just doesn't work for me. The first one, Aang, this character, they really didn't do very well. To be honest, Aang is someone that is really important to do, well, because he's the main character. He doesn't feel warm, he doesn't feel upbeat, he's not lighthearted, he's not funny, and he's not jovial. He always feels so serious and sad all the time. Which makes sense, yeah, because he has a lot of responsibility, and his family just kind of died, you know what I mean? The monks are like his family, basically. But he's a fucking kid, so... And he wasn't really like that in the animation. And I know that people bring that up, and some people don't like it when you refer to the animation like that in that regard, you know, and they are doing their own thing, and I kind of respect that. But still, Aang's, at the end of the day, is supposed to be fun, uplifting, upbeat, and, cheerful, and yeah, there are serious moments, and the tone changes throughout the animation, just like in the live action, but the live action just feels so somber, bad, and terrible, and it feels like everything is awful in the show, as it should be because there's a war, but part of the side missions kind of bring out the best in the world, and they just go to show that you can enjoy yourself in times of tragedy and moments of anguish, and that's why they had episodes like in the Fire Nation where Aang was dancing, and they had all these great moments that built characters and built chemistry, and you really cared about them, but I don't really fucking care about them anymore, I'm not gonna lie. Boomy also appears to be some grumpy old weird man professing his strange resentment for Aang because he left 100 years ago. Whilst in the animation, they show us a version that is way more lighthearted, whilst also giving actual tests, forcing Aang to participate in them, where Sokka and Katara will be encased in creeping crystal. The first being the key in the waterfall, the second being finding his pet, and the third being literally fighting Boomy. Each trial testing his persistence, strategy under pressure, and strength in order to determine whether he's ready for the Fire Nation. with the last test being to guess his name.
Is my name.
Afterwards, they embrace and hug. Mostly, Boomy just wanted to have fun with his friends from 100 years ago. That's literally it. Whereas Boomy, once again in the live action, feels so spiteful and just so depressed, acting as if Aang wronged him, which is just such a weird take. I mean, Aang doesn't even know his name straight off the bat, and Katara and Sokka aren't even there. These are just weird changes to me. They also somehow managed to ruin Azula. She somehow appears way earlier than in the original. The reason they actually ruined her though is because they showed her to be someone who was easily offended and someone who has actual empathy. When she literally cries like a bitch, whilst being desperately needy for her daddy's approval.
It became personal with me.
Whereas in the animation, this is definitely not the case, and she is actually shown as someone who lacks empathy. Not to mention the fact that she needs to be perfect and has this deep-rooted insecurity, in that it doesn't matter if she's successful, it's not enough. She has to be perfect. She's someone who enjoys tormenting others as well. We can easily see this in the episode where she tries to recruit Ty Lee from the circus, and she manipulates her into hunting the Avatar, which is actually pretty freaky. Like, she's someone that has this psychology which can almost be compared to the Joker, the only difference being that she broke in the end. And all of that just doesn't even exist in the live action. It's such a waste of potential, bro. And now for the writing. Now, for the most part, they did change a fair amount, but the first thing I did notice was that Aang had his bison whistle in the first episode. However, in the animation, he only got it in the 9th, where he purchased it from a group of merchants, which is actually important, and I think it's part of the reason why this kind of failed, was because in the animation, they had a lot of side missions that kind of gave depth to the characters. Like, Aang just kind of gets the bison whistle just straight away, Appa lies instantly, like, it's just sort of weird. And by the way, that episode is called The Waterbending Scroll. It's one of the few things they did change. They also managed to change the cave episode from Season 2, called The Cave of Two Lovers, which is actually the second episode of Season 2, and I feel like it ruined a lot because Katara and Aang were no longer together anymore. So they weren't able to develop, and the relationship wasn't able to go any further than what it is in the live action. And instead, it's Katara and Sokka, which kind of like ruins everything for me. Like, I feel like they already have a relationship and a bond. It's brother and sister. You don't really need anything more, I feel like. Everyone kind of knows how the dynamic goes, and it kind of just ruined everything. Like, Aang is supposed to be with Kara, and now that they changed that, it just ruined a lot for me. Not to mention that the badgers can apparently sense emotions. What? Like, it's just so weird to me. However, one thing I did like about the writing, and I know I want to put the good stuff at the end, but just this one interjection, I just wanted to say that I think the one thing that was pretty cool was the fact that when Aang went into the Avatar state with the ocean spirit, they wrote in the fact that he would just wander for the rest of eternity as the ocean spirit and could never be brought back ever again, unless Yue went in and then sacrificed her life. I also like the aspect that they finally made her a waterbender. I always thought Yue should have been a waterbender, and they should have showed that. I'm not sure if she was a waterbender in the animation, but I am glad that they changed it, if they did. However, there is one thing, Zuko doesn't capture Aang, and I feel like that's such a missed opportunity, because the fact where he mentioned that Azula was born lucky and he was lucky to be born, and I really like that aspect to it, and the fact that he captured him and he had to give him up, and he ended up losing to Katara, and it showed his resilience, and the fact that he beat Katara, and I just like that whole aspect of where he's sitting in the cave. We just missed that whole thing, and he just ends up fleeing, and I really didn't like that bit. It just kind of gave me the ick. I also want to jump in here and say, how the fuck has Aang not even learnt waterbending yet? For the entirety of the first season, this is the extent of his waterbending. Right here, bro. Like, right here. He has done nothing but tickle Katara with fucking water in a pond. Like, this shit is so stupid. Bro, this is dumb. Oh my god. Back onto the video again. Another element they also changed from the animation in the live action was actually that Ko can no longer steal your face just by your facial expressions changing it.
Not the slightest expression, or he will steal your face.
He traps you in your own nightmares in his fog, in the spirit world, which I thought was like an actually interesting take. And the only way you could get him to release your friends, or Aang's friends in this instance, was by giving him back a totem, which is like somehow the mother of the faceless or some shit, which was kind of an interesting take, but it just ruined so much. Like, they don't even revisit Heibai anymore, so that whole bridge between the spirit world and the real world and the Avatar bridging those two places together kind of goes to shit now. That whole thing of just understanding Heibai and understanding his frustration and what makes him angry and going on a journey of like discovery within the spirit world itself, like kind of goes to shit. And we don't learn as much in the spirit world as a result. Like he just disappears. They just ignore that entire side mission. It was so infuriating, man. However, I did like the difference in Ko, how he forced Aang to bring the totem to him rather than trying to take his face. However, he's not even the one to tell him who the moon and ocean spirits even are. Instead, it's Karuk. And I really didn't like that one. I thought that was kind of shit. That gave me the ick as well, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I feel like how they showed the avatars speaking to Aang and sort of guiding him, that didn't really rub me the right way. I feel like it should have been more or less just Roku the whole time. Like, I didn't know why Kyoshi and Karuk were in it. Like, it should have just been Roku, especially because he was the reason the 100 Years' War literally started. So having him barely in the first season makes no sense. He is the cause of everything. He gives exposition as to why this actually occurred in depth, and he's barely in it. Like, it makes no sense, bro. I feel like they also ruined the episode with the Freedom Fighters with Jet in there, seeing as they literally took the episode from Season 1, Episode 10. And I think the reason for this is because, well, I mean, we barely get to see him, and when we do, he's only ever with Katara. However, in the animation, he's with Aang, Katara, and Sokka. And they all get to meet him, and the relationship develops and blossoms. It also makes his betrayal so much more gut-wrenching. I think it was such an important episode because it really speaks about the importance of justice versus revenge. And I think that's such an important value and also lesson and theme to talk about and to focus on. However, like, you don't really get any of that in the live action because they just hit things so quickly. Like, it's almost like Katara doesn't even spend time with Jet, barely that much. Like, there is zero chemistry between any of these cast members, I'm not even gonna lie. And not to mention, when Katara ends up getting the best of Jet, it just finishes over in like 2 seconds. And Aang and Sokka are still not there. They barely ever meet him. The only scene they get with him is the entry into Omashu. That's it. That's the only one. And then there's the sexist Sokka arc, which is what Netflix calls it apparently. Although I never really thought of this scene as like sexist. I think it was a scene that was definitely incredibly crucial to the IP and to what is Avatar. Like, it's literally a defining moment for Sokka, and I feel like to take that out, it just kind of ruined the character for me. I think it's an important lesson for also people who watch the show. Like, it just goes to show that warriors and sometimes people who fight, whether it be a mental or physical battle, or maybe for a martial arts discipline or something else, just in life. All fighters come in different shapes and different sizes, and it can be a man or it can be a woman. And I don't think you should judge someone on the way they look, and I think that is what the core lesson was about, not just about the sexism. You can't take this out of the show, and well, while they did take it out of the show, I still feel like I didn't hate Sokka's arc, and I can explain that later on when we dive into the good things. And finally, the good things. This I'm pretty fucking hyped for. Like, the reason actually for Zuko's banishment was goddamn fucking fire. They somehow made it so much better than like the original, which is actually crazy to me. Like, the way they incorporated the 41st Infantry and how they were banished as well, and that's the reason why Zuko was banished, and they were banished together on the same ship, was really cool. I like that twist. I think it's amazing. And also, I think it gives him more depth. I think it humanizes him more, and I think it makes the character a lot better. I think the live action also stayed pretty faithful to the franchise, and they also showed how ruthless the Firebending Nation can really be. Like, the Sozin's comment scene where he just lights that guy on fire is fucking crazy. Not to mention the fact that, like, I think it's also the way they do firebending. Like, it really does look passionate, aggressive, like, no telegraphing whatsoever. Like, it looks good, man. I think you really feel like the Firebending Nation are the enemy. Like, they're the biggest pieces of shit in this show, and I think live-action TV show does a really good job of that. I think the fact that Fire Lord Ozai is so ridiculously hard on his son just makes it so much better too. Like, the way he somehow burns his face, because in the original it doesn't actually show that. So when he hits him with the fireball, like, I thought it was just like a fireball punch, basically. Like, I didn't think he sears it onto his face while holding him there. Little details like that just made it so much better. Like, Ozai looks more evil, like, everything looks better. Like, I think they did a really good job of Zhao, too. They somehow changed him. I mean, in the original, he's more militant, and he used orthodox methods, and he was really, really loyal to Ozai. But in this one, he wasn't, and he played more of like a Peter Pettigrew, like, type type slimy character. And I feel like if you explained General Zhao to a random person from the original, their interpretation would be what the live action is. And I fucking love that. Like, his plan to be the Fire Lord and then having that blow up in his face and then dying is like the best thing. Like, I think it doesn't also like change too much. So if you really don't like it, I don't think it's going to bother you as much. But they did Zhao really well. All the firebenders except Azula was done incredibly well, and I kind of like those changes, I'm not gonna lie. Specifically, the episode Masks, as well as having some changes, still became a really good episode for me. Actually, I think it was the best, in my opinion, and I'm not alone, a lot of people definitely thought that as well. Now, another thing I enjoyed was Sokka's arc with the mechanic. Now, remember how I said before in the writing segment that I actually didn't mind Sokka's arc? It was actually because of this. And I think the way that they approached it and said that you can be a leader in multiple ways, you don't have to be a warrior. You can be intellectually gifted, and his gift is engineering. And I actually kind of like that sort of take, and I sort of like that outlook on things. Like, it also just goes to show that masculinity, or just things in general, can appear in different ways. Like, I think it's good to be strong and go to the gym and get jacked as fuck. But I think it brings an important aspect of like what guys think in general. It's okay not being the best warrior or athlete. Like, and I think that this was a really good scene, just in general. And I think it definitely redeemed the entire arc. But was it better than the original? No. No, it wasn't. However, we did get Monk Gyatso, and I thought the dynamic between Aang and Monk Gyatso was pretty good, because mainly we never really got that father figure type of role in Avatar for Aang. So I think this was a good spin, and it was a great addition. And you can definitely see how charismatic he is, and how Aang took inspiration from him in his approach to life. And I thought that rather than seeing flashbacks, we finally get to see him and Aang converse, which is really good. And now for the greatest scene in the live action, which has to be Lu Ten's funeral. Now, I think in my mind that Zuko and Iroh, the two characters together, definitely have a really rare connection within not only the live action as well. I think in this scene, it really solidifies just how great they get on together and the chemistry they have as actors as well. Like, this scene was just so good. And I think any scene where Zuko is somehow separated from the Fire Nation and the characteristics that makes them evil and sinister, and where he is separated from that and he's shown to be more compassionate and different, you know? And I think this scene really shows how eccentric he is compared to the Fire Nation. And it just shows that what they have and the bond that they have goes beyond just uncle and nephew, but father and son. And I think this was a really great way of showing it, especially because in the original, they had Tales of Ba Sing Se, where Iroh sings Leaves of the Vine, but we never really knew that Zuko knew about Lu Ten. Like, we can assume that, but I don't think he did, in all fairness. Like, you could assume it because obviously it's his uncle, right? But he would have passed away long before, when he was younger. We didn't really know that they got on together, right? Not only that, they did a really good job of showing how somber and sad and melancholy and just how terrible that the Fire Nation is, and war is as a whole, you know? I think Iroh and the actor who played him just did really well, you know, and this has to be the highlight of the TV show for sure. And before I end the video, I'm going to show you YouTubers who basically summarize the entirety of the show, this video, and give their opinion like I will too.
The changes they made are so stupid. The changes they made are really bad. The additions they made are really good.
But anyway, if you're ever interested in Avatar, just watch the fucking cartoon.
And as for the rating, I'm going to give it a 4.99 out of 10. And if you enjoyed the video, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also leave a comment down if you have any opinions or thoughts on the show. It actually helps the algorithm. And also, if you want to check out another one of my videos where I talk about the most annoying movie tropes, check out this one right here where I talk about that. So take it easy, big dogs. I'll catch you on the next one.